laughs at God in a hospital. No one laughs at God in a war. No one's laughing at God when they're starving or freezing or so very poor. No one laughs at God when a doctor calls after some routine tests. No one's laughing at God when it's gotten real late and their kid's not back from that party yet.
Happy Sabbath! Welcome back again after another week. I'd like to point out really fast that the opening photos were taken exactly 8 years ago to this day, thanks to Google Photos reminding me of that. I took them in the Keys back in 2012, and definitely one of the prettiest sunsets I've ever seen, and as you'll notice is also the image I used for my channel. Sadly, my little hidden park has been torn down. Well, here's the park I used to come to, where I took all those videos I posted. Where that dirt mound is the pond where all the baby little turtles are now probably no longer with us. I don't know how they get permission to do stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, back over here, back in the distance, that's where the other giant pond was. So yeah, it was fun while it lasted, so I'm glad you guys got to see it. I feel really bad for all the fish and little turtles they buried. But it makes me long even more for heaven. Maybe on the earth made new, Jesus will put a little secluded park right there for me. I know he's sad about it too, since we did spend a lot of time there together. I just wanted to share that now I'm really happy I made my first video exploring. So it has a nice little recorded history of its final days here on earth. So, a quick note, this video is not for kids, in case you have some around. It's not wildly inappropriate, there are just some topics and images which I feel adults can process better than kids, because it does get a little wild. But let's open with a word of prayer as we start to look at prophecy being fulfilled all around us. Dear Father in heaven, I would pray that as we enter your last days, and the enemy's temptations and deceptions grow stronger around us, that we may grow stronger than his deceptions and grow in your word, have trust and faith in you. May we not be afraid. May we know that we have you on our side and that what may destroy our mortal body does not concern us. What concerns us is how our heavenly afterlife is with you and that we are right with you in our hearts and minds. I pray these things in your name, Lord Jesus. Bless all those who are watching. Amen. So last week, I ended with a video of an Arizona state senator calling for a Sunday law. Now, we covered the importance of the Sabbath fairly extensively on this channel, and in the descriptions, I've put links to Hastings SDA channel, as it is the most thorough examination of why Saturday, the seventh day, is the true Sabbath. So if you want more information, just click on the links in the description. And if you feel impressed, make sure to like and subscribe to all the channels that I put down in the descriptions. You might have noticed last week, I didn't really address number 5 on this list. So today we're going to deal with their belief of being a solid universal church and the issue of the Sunday law and how it will be brought into effect, as that senator was pining for. As technology has increased, we have all seen the way we are now tracked, from devices in our homes that are always listening to our conversations, to facial recognition technology to unlock your phone that is stored in servers. In the new Amazon One, it lets you pay with your palm print, but it's revolutionary. It's not like some old police station with an ink blotter. It literally reads the pattern of blood vessels in your hand, which are unique to us. But we will get to that later. I want to focus on a few phrases right now. And for the entire video, we'll be focusing on these phrases. And much like we mentioned the phrase the Lord's Day being a way of avoiding the word Sabbath in order to enforce Sunday, these phrases are also huge red flags. The common good, also called collectivism, are just synonyms for making everyone do what we say. Here's a quick breakdown of what communism socialism looks like.
What exactly is communism? Well, there are a number of overlapping philosophies and socioeconomic systems that can be described as communist in nature. But in the most basic sense, communism is when all manufacturing or means of production are equally owned by all the members of a state. The intended result is to eliminate the capitalist-inspired class system where one class does all the work and the other gets all the money. Although similar ideas have existed both naturally and intentionally since the dawn of time, the most common form of communism comes from the work of German philosophers Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, in what is today known as Marxism. In particular, Marxism is focused on the exploitation of the worker. It's based on the idea that any profit generated by the worker but instead goes to the business owner is a form of inequality and should be abolished. In recent history, several countries, including the USSR, China, Vietnam, and Cuba, have attempted to institute their own versions of communism. However, all can be said to be predominantly socialist and not communist. The biggest difference between the two is that socialism says that all workers should get an equal share in profit and property, while communism says that there shouldn't be money or ownership in general, and everyone should get as much as they need and work as much as they can. Unfortunately, attempts to achieve this political philosophy have led to lower standards of living, government corruption, and in the case of the USSR, total collapse and failure. A number of reasons have been put forth as to why communism hasn't worked out historically. But the strongest criticism of the philosophy is that communism removes the incentive for people to work harder than they absolutely have to. It also leads to resentment of those who work less hard but receive the same. In general, communism is described as being great in theory while disastrous in practice. And the state of the world seems to agree with that assessment.
So what happens when this doesn't apply to just industry and economy, but also to religion? When the state and the church come together and they decide they need to eliminate all the differences in religion? What happens when the dominant church, and as we've seen, the Catholic Church aspires to dominate once again and is very corrupt, it feels like Sabbath keepers aren't going along with the Sunday plan? From socialism to fascism, you will always see the phrase, for the common good, which is why collectivism is dangerous to the true followers of Christ.
Indoctrinated into the youth at school and via popular culture, and championed by the vast majority of talking heads in the mainstream media. This idea is collectivism. To understand what collectivism is, we must consider the question: does the individual exist for the sake of society, or does society exist for the sake of individuals? Those who adhere to collectivism believe that the individual exists for the sake of society, and therefore that the individual has to subordinate himself to and conduct himself for the benefit of society, and to sacrifice his selfish private interests to the common good. This collectivist mindset is foundational to communism, fascism, and socialism. The common good before the individual good, proclaimed one of collectivism's most infamous adherents. The doctrine of collectivism has been put into practice by many dictators such as Hitler, Lenin, Stalin, Pol Pot, and Mao. Death, destruction, and suffering on a mass scale was the end result in each case. How does placing the good of society above the good of the individual tend towards such unfortunate outcomes? Is it not a display of compassion to sacrifice our personal interests for the greater good of our society? At first glance, collectivism may seem to be a virtuous position to take. Since the dawn of civilization, it has been ruling classes who anoint themselves the arbiters of the greater good, and so not surprisingly the greater good, more often than not, merely amounts to the good of those in power. Or as the 20th century psychologist Nathaniel Branden wrote, "With such collectivist systems, the individual has always been a victim, twisted against him or herself and commanded to be unselfish, in sacrificial service to some allegedly higher value, called God, or Pharaoh, or Emperor, or King, or society, or the state, or the race, or the proletariat, or the cosmos." It is a strange paradox of our history that this doctrine, which tells us that we are to regard ourselves, in effect, as sacrificial animals, has been generally accepted as a doctrine representing benevolence and love for humankind. From the first individual, who was sacrificed on an altar for the good of the tribe, to the heretics and dissenters burned at the stake for the good of the populace or the glory of God, to the millions exterminated in slave labor camps for the good of the race or of the proletariat. It is this collectivist morality that has served as justification for every dictatorship and every atrocity, past or present.
Did anyone else make the connection here that it's the ruling class that decides the moral values and what is right for the common good? And as we saw last week, the Pope decides what sins can and can't be forgiven, and they consider his decisions to be infallible, as if he was God himself. And they feel the Mass even puts them above their Creator and God, blasphemously, as the creator of their Creator. This video also pointed out that the idea sounds very nice. Well, the papacy is counting on that. Let's see what they have to say about collectivism and the common good.
Before the general audience, the Pope toured St. Peter's Square in the Popemobile, accompanied by a group of children. Later, Pope Francis was greeted in the square by a music band who played for him this joyful melody. In his catechesis, the Pope reflected on the commandment to keep holy the Lord's Day and spoke of the meaning of rest.
Il concetto di vita oggi dominante non ha il baricentro nell'attività e nell'impegno, ma nell'evasione. Guadagnare per divertirsi, appagarsi. L'immagine modello è quella di una persona di successo che può permettersi ampi e diversi spazi di piacere. L'uomo non si è mai riposato tanto come oggi, eppure l'uomo non ha mai sperimentato tanto vuoto come oggi.
Pope Francis recalled that in the Bible, God's rest is related to looking joyfully at reality, and that this is the model of authentic rest.
La domenica non è il giorno per cancellare gli altri giorni, ma per ricordarli, benedirli e fare pace con la vita. La domenica è la giornata per fare pace con la vita, dicendo la vita è preziosa. Non è facile, a volte è dolorosa, ma è preziosa.
In a catechesis full of optimism, the Pope asked to resist the temptation to highlight the problems and instead contemplate the good things in life. He said that true serenity does not consist in changing one's own history, but in welcoming and appreciating it.
In this article, from last year around this time, this is the year the Pope wants to launch a global education pact. Can we say school indoctrination? It states, Pope Francis is inviting world leaders and young people to come together at the Vatican on May 14, 2020 for an event called Reinventing the Global Educational Alliance. Never before has there been such a need to unite our efforts in a broad educational alliance to form mature individuals capable of overcoming division and antagonism and to restore the fabric of relationships for the sake of a more fraternal humanity. Francis wrote in the message announcing the initiative released by the Vatican's press office on Thursday, according to the Pope, this not only includes teachers, students, and their families, but wider civil society, including science, sports, politics, and charitable organizations. An alliance, in other words, between the Earth's inhabitants and our common home. In addition to the May 14 meeting in the Vatican's Paul VI audience hall, Francis said that the number of seminars on related topics will take place in other locations to prepare for the event. The statement said the 5th anniversary of the environmental encyclical Laudato Si was an ideal platform to launch the event. The most significant personalities in the world are invited to take part. That Satan may deceive even the very elect, eh? To take part in the proposed initiative, political, cultural, and religious, and in particular, the young people to whom the future belongs, the Vatican statement says the goal is to arouse an awareness and a wave of responsibility for the common good of humanity, starting from the young and reaching all people of goodwill. In Laudato Si, on care for our common home, Pope Francis states, on Sunday, our participation in the Eucharist has special importance. Sunday, like the Jewish Sabbath, is meant to be a day which heals our relationships with God, with ourselves, with others, and with the world. Sunday is the day of the resurrection, the first day of the new creation. There's so much blasphemy here, it's hard to address it all, but when did the Bible ever speak of the new creation unless it's speaking of the new heaven and the new earth after this world was done away with by fire? Or is going to be done away with? And how can we heal a relationship with God by disobeying His Sabbath commandment? And I will point out again, a true follower of God is under the Jewish covenant because he is a Jew in his heart. The Pope is essentially admitting he does not follow Christ or the Bible. He has set himself up as his own God.
The common good has historical roots that stretch back to ancient philosophy and early Christianity, but it's also an idea that has contemporary relevance. So what exactly is the common good? The common good can be helpfully understood as an ideal and a moral measure. As an ideal, the common good points to a state of affairs, a world in which all the conditions are in place that would allow everyone to reach their full potential as persons and communities. Conditions such as access to good education and healthcare, safe housing, fair wages, and the ability to participate in political and cultural life. In this sense, the common good won't ever be fully realized, but it does provide us with a goal to work toward. The common good is also a moral measure, a tool we can use to evaluate whether our choices, policies, and institutions align with this ideal. For example, do my purchasing decisions reflect merely self-interested concern for my own well-being and status?
You feeding kids with all that gold?
Or do I try to spend my money in ways that align with environmental sustainability? Do I live simply so that more of my resources can be dedicated to meeting the basic needs of others? There are a few key assumptions built into the concept of the common good. First, it assumes that human beings are fundamentally social creatures. We are built to be in relationships and not live in isolation. Second, because we are made for community, our individual well-being is mutually interdependent. My good includes yours and vice versa. Finally, the idea of the common good rests on a pretty robust optimism about human beings. It doesn't deny that social conflict will happen, but it does assume that since we are built for community, we are willing to treat each other with goodwill and to collaborate in building the common good. Now, the idea of the common good does have some problems. The assumed optimism about human beings can be hard to sustain when there's so much evidence of ill will and such widespread forms of violence and inequality. Moreover, anytime anyone claims to know exactly what is good for all persons, there is a chance that their moral vision can be mistaken or limited by their own experience, prejudice, or self-interest. A vision of the common good can be used to silence those who protest or disagree. In short, attempts to specify the common good can fall short of being truly common or truly good. Because of these dangers, it's important to imagine and interpret the common good in relation to other moral commitments and principles. For example, a commitment to prioritizing the well-being of the most vulnerable members of society, what Catholics call a preferential option for the poor and vulnerable, means listening to what they have to say about how the status quo benefits and harms, includes and excludes them, and what they think a mutually beneficial community might look like. As an ideal state of affairs and a moral measure, the common good needs to be critically examined and revised again and again. The unfinished character of the common good is part of its power as a tool for moral imagination and decision-making. It continually calls us to see, judge, and act to build a world in which all persons can thrive as individuals and together.
Catholic influencers are using TikTok for community and evangelization, creating videos about this topic and teaching things like Adhering to collective norms is doing what is accepted in society. For example, helping those less fortunate or those who have been injured. When displaying collective responsibility, people help those less fortunate so that everybody can have equal opportunities in life. This is why the Lord has impressed me that it is so important to have counterpoint videos that teach the truth. The truth will never go viral. The truth can only reach individuals with a love for God and an open heart and mind. Everywhere you see these philosophies, there's destruction. Ellen White in Great Controversy says, when Satan wrought through the Roman Church to lead men away from obedience, his agency was concealed, and his work was so disguised that the degradation and misery which resulted were not seen to be the fruits of transgression, but his power was so far counteracted by the working of the Spirit of God that his purposes were prevented from reaching their full fruition. The people did not trace the effect to its cause and discover the source of their miseries. But in the Revolution, the law of God was openly set aside by the National Council, and the reign of terror which followed, the working of cause and effect could be seen by all. As we've seen in the violent riots lately that have now spanned the globe as they follow the lead of America, like for instance, what principles is BLM truly founded on? Well, Black Lives Matter was founded by community organizers. One of the 3 co-founders said in 2015 that she and another co-founder are trained Marxists. Black Lives Matter has grown into a national anti-racism movement broadly supported by Americans, few of whom would identify themselves as a Marxist. Now see how this is so insidious. These people are following Marxist ideals and propaganda without even knowing it. These same principles of equality are preached by the Catholics. God never said he was here to make everyone think and act the same way. In fact, as true Christians, unless we are trying to witness, we shouldn't have non-believers as friends. 2 Corinthians 6:14-18 says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers, for what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? What accord has Christ with Belial? Or what portion does a believer share with an unbeliever? What agreement has the temple of God with idols? For we are the temple of the living God. As God said, I will make my dwelling among them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Therefore go out from their midst, and be separate from them, says the Lord, and touch no unclean thing. Then I will welcome you, and I will be a father to you, and you shall be my sons and daughters to me, says the Lord Almighty." 2 Timothy 3:5, "Having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power, avoid such people." 1 Corinthians 15:33, "Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals." 2 John 1:7-11, "For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch yourselves, so that you may not lose what we have worked for, but may win a full reward. Everyone who goes on ahead and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your house or give him any greeting, for whoever greets him takes part in his wicked works." That's a very serious statement there. The Bible is very clear that there is no good apart from Christ, and common good to the world can never be in harmony with him. Therefore, we can never be in harmony with the common good or the world. We're going to look like the villains to the rest of the world in the end time. We have to have a solid foundation now that we are standing with Christ and have the faith that he is in our corner to face the time of troubles with a faith like the 3 Hebrews. It will be hard because even we will see how we look to the rest of the world as being against helping the poor or not wanting to feed the hungry or not caring about the environment, when we know deep in our hearts those things aren't true. And it always hurts to be falsely accused of things. COVID has been a giant experiment in how fast they can normalize people to things, shutting down businesses and making us all wear masks and stay home, and they keep calling it the new normal. And the whole time, they're touting how beneficial this has been for the environment, while ignoring the dramatic increase in suicides, domestic violence, deaths from untreated illnesses. As you can see from these articles, they are already pushing for one day off. Sunday rest, for the good of the environment and the common good, under threat of continued lockdowns. Either you take Sunday off, or we can just keep you locked down, is what they're going to say. Then once people are used to taking Sundays off, they will then enforce a mandatory Sunday worship, because, hey, you weren't doing anything anyway. This is exactly what happened back in the Roman Empire, March 7th of the year 321. Emperor Constantine issued a civil decree stating workers should rest on the venerable day of the sun. Mind you, this was a civil decree and not a religious one. There was no mandatory worshiping of the sun. It was then shortly after the early Catholic Church latched onto it and turned it into a mandatory day of worship, which happens to be on the day of the sun. It always starts out as a civil thing, and they will tell you religion is not involved, but it will come as a thief in the night, and lo, behold, I come quickly. So let's read part of this one article from the Catholic Church. Creation and the season of creation call us to renew our commitment to the common good, especially in service to the poor. As Pope Francis recalls, God created the world for everyone, and thus the natural environment is a collective good, the patrimony of all humanity and the responsibility of everyone, from Laudato Si. Therefore, the Church invites each of us to promote the common good through care for creation in 7 concrete ways. Respond to the cry of the poor by defending human life from conception to natural death. Respond to the cry of the earth by supporting clean energy, clean water, and safe environments. Promote ecological economics through ethical investment and consumption. Adopt simple lifestyles that use resources thoughtfully and reduce pollution. Increase ecological awareness through education. Foster ecological spirituality. Ecological spirituality, isn't that earth worship? By seeking reconciliation for acts that harm creation and advocate for action to protect the environment and local communities. Promoting the common good in these ways simultaneously protects human dignity. Sadly, the poor are often the first victims of environmental destruction and suffer disproportionately from its effects. As a result, many lack basic necessities and may even be forced to flee their homes. As followers of Christ, we are called to see His face in them, to welcome them, and to accompany them. Solidarity is the recognition that in our common humanity, we do not walk this earth alone, and we need one another along the way. Solidarity requires that we follow the example of Christ in giving ourselves for the good of our neighbors, above all when basic human dignity and rights are threatened. Well, I remember what Jesus said about the Israelites having solidarity with the surrounding nations. But this all sounds so sweet. It's all about basic human dignity and rights. Look closely, and you'll see the Catholic Church is very interested in the vaccine. But only for the common good, of course. Or is it? God has commanded us not to have pig in our bodies. Those of us who refuse to be injected with the swine particles contained in the vaccines will be marked and tracked socially, and the Pope knows true Sabbath keepers won't take it. Maybe not COVID, maybe another virus, but however, I do believe not taking a COVID vaccine will have social ramifications.
Well, Australia is set to roll out a coronavirus tracing app within 2 weeks, which could help bring an end to isolation restrictions. Called Trace Together, the app uses Bluetooth technology to record contact with people, so if they test positive for COVID-19, you can be notified. A similar model is used in Singapore, but the take-up there has been very slow. For it to be effective, 40% of the population must opt in. Authorities are hopeful it will be embraced in Australia despite privacy concerns. Joining me now is Government Services Minister Stuart Robert. Morning, Minister. Can you explain how this app works and how we will benefit from downloading it?
Thanks, Nat. The COVID Trace app that we're looking to put out in the coming weeks, and the tech is being tested, is simply an app or a digital way of replicating a manual process. Right now, if you're tested positive for COVID-19, health officials will sit down and talk you through who you've been in contact with. The COVID Trace app simply digitises that process. So if your app has been within 15 minutes or 15 minutes duration of someone within 1.5 metres proximity, there'll be a polling, a swapping of phone numbers, and that'll stay on your phone. And then, of course, if you test positive for the app, a voluntary app, of course, you'll give consent, and those numbers will be provided securely to health professionals, and they'll be able to call people you've been in contact with. So it's a health app, and it's designed to give you a sense of peace of mind that if you've been in close contact with someone, health officials will call you.
Minister, people are saying here, I don't want the government to have access to my information. It's on Bluetooth. Who will have access to it?
Well, the government won't have information regarding you, Nat. Let's say you had it on your phone, and as you went through your life, over a course of a rolling 21 days, you were within close proximity, 1.5 metres for 15 minutes with 5 people. Those numbers will be on your phone, nowhere else encrypted. You can't access them, no one else can. And if you tested positive, the authorities would ask you to consent, and that'd be uploaded to a secure server where health authorities would call those 5 people. That's it. No one's got access to your data. No one's tracking you. There's no surveillance. This is simply a digital way of a current manual process, and it makes it quicker. And frankly, Nat, it'll give you a peace of mind that when you're out and about, if someone with the virus is close to you, health authorities will call you. OK,
we need 40% take-up. Will be interesting to see. Thank you very much for explaining it, Minister.
In Australia, the Prime Minister actually admitted that they can't force people to get the vaccine, so he's giving power to the individual businesses. Using the social tracking apps, they can refuse service, refuse to hire, or even fire current employees who haven't been vaccinated and have their tracking app that confirms vaccination. Every business has to have a scannable QR code on any entrance or exit that links to the tracking app, and it checks you into or out of that business. If they don't put those codes up against the doors, they will face steep fines, much like the huge fines churches get that are trying to congregate. On another point, you ever notice how the mainstream media always portrays anti-vaxxers as crazy? Maybe they were just preparing for something. I mean, just make anyone who doesn't go along with the plan feel like they're crazy. But how would they know if we were going to church or worshiping on Sunday or not? Well, here we see if you meet in church, you have to give your contact information, and it's mandatory those lists are handed over to the government. Now, let's go back in time.
On March the 11th, 1933, Genrikh Yagoda hit upon an idea that was almost brilliant in its cynicism. A future head of the NKVD, Yagoda is mostly famous today for being just one in a long line of people Stalin promoted to the top job, then got bored with and had shot. In 1933, though, he was part of the team overseeing the utter mess that was collectivization, tasked with making Stalin's decrees somehow work without starving everybody to death. So Yagoda hit upon an ingenious solution. The USSR needed to set up collective farms while also punishing kulaks. Well, then why not condemn those kulaks to work on collective farms? Easy. Yagoda's plan was to resettle 2 million dissidents in Siberia, give them tools, and make them build their own self-sustaining farms. All these new farms would solve the collectivization famine, while the miserable Siberian weather would provide the punishment part of it. Yagoda was so pleased with his idea that he started implementing it even before Stalin agreed, sending out quotas of kulaks for police forces to arrest. And it's at this point that everything descended into a terrifying farce. In Stalin's police, failing to fulfill your quota meant becoming part of someone else's quota. So you were extremely incentivized to find dissidents, even where no dissidents existed. That meant if you were living in an urban area with few kulaks, you went after those failing the internal passport regime instead. A hated feature of Tsarist Russia, internal passports had been ditched by the Bolsheviks after they gained power, but Stalin had revived the system the previous December. Distributed only to those doing useful work, internal passports effectively made you a legal citizen. Failed to carry one, and you were automatically a criminal. And in the cities, there were always enough people without passports to fulfill police quotas. Kuzma Salnikov, for example, was a married miner from Novokuznetsk and a passionate communist. Then, one day, he happened to go to a market without his internal passport just as the police sealed off the building. He was deported from his home city without even a chance to inform his wife. He never saw her or his 2 kids again. Awful as Salnikov's story is, it's just one of a great many. There was the 12-year-old girl on a station platform for 10 minutes while her mother went to buy bread. When the mother returned, her child was gone, abducted by policemen trying to hit their quota. There was the 103-year-old man who went out on his street for some air, or the student who was snatched off his aunt's doorstep in Moscow. There was even a pregnant woman deported for not carrying her passport, despite having it clutched in her hand the entire time. All across the USSR, hundreds of thousands disappeared in this way. As their families struggled to find out what was happening, Yagoda's goons loaded those captured onto trains bound for the wilds of Siberia. Vagrants, common criminals, political prisoners, kulaks, and ordinary people were abducted off the street, and they all became part of this unwilling exodus into Russia's frozen interior.
Long story short, this is from a documentary about an island where it all turned into vicious cannibalism. Really interesting how the common good deteriorates all the way to people eating each other. For the common good. But now let's look at what's happening in modern times.
So, picture your life in a place where everything you do, what you buy, how you behave, is tracked. The government gives you a score, and the score is a measure of how trustworthy you are as a citizen, and determines what you're allowed to do, like ever. Boarding a train, getting a mortgage, all goes back to this score. It's called social credit. It sounds like that show Black Mirror, but it's actually happening in China. So how does that change you? Does it change you? What does your life look like when your every move is watched? The system's eyes are in big data, artificial intelligence, and roughly 200 million surveillance cameras. And that's totally fine with Ouyang Haoyu. She's 21, graduated from a good school with solid grades. She's diligent. She's nice. No surprise, she's a 752. That's her rating with Sesame Credit, a private company working with the government on the algorithms for the social credit system. The scores go from 350 to 950 and are based on habits and behavior. Buy clothes or diapers, it's good. A lot of alcohol, too many video games, not so good. Haoyu's 752 puts her in model citizen range and gets her discounts and privileges, like using a shared bike without a deposit. She likes it. Her friends do too. They all have pretty high scores.
It's a mechanism like pushes you to become a better citizen, to build on the trust, especially on the Chinese market.
Because you're not going to be punished if you haven't done anything wrong.
I think that's the point. I think the system is working as a warning or an alert to push people to do it, yeah. to be a good person.
And it's mandatory. When it goes national, social credit scores will be assigned to every one of China's citizens for life. And what's weird is that so many people seem okay with it. It's complicated, but China went from extreme poverty to economic giant pretty quickly. A credit history system didn't grow at the same pace, so people would default on loans and get away with it. Add in scandals around fake food, tainted baby milk, counterfeit goods, and what you've got is a big problem with trust. So, in 2014, the Communist Party called for a system to allow the trustworthy to roam everywhere under heaven, while making it hard for the discredited to take a single step. The model is a place called Rongcheng. It's in Shandong province. It's orderly, streets are spotless, cars slow down, which is unheard of in China. Words like honesty and credibility appear on propaganda posters. Display cases show pictures of Rongcheng's most honored citizens. You start with 1,000 points, and you can print out your report anytime. You lose points for things like jaywalking, littering, tossing cigarette butts, or spreading rumors. Cameras do a lot of the surveillance work, but it's pretty analog too, like posters that list the ways you can gain or lose points. And each night, local TV shows the surveillance highlights of the day. And then there's Zhou Aini. She's an information collector. a paid enforcer who walks around and writes down deeds about her neighbors. Like the man who carried a drunk person home. Things like this are good deeds, she said. But the farmer overheard swearing and being rude. Yeah, bad deeds. Her quota is 10 a month. She likes the work and thinks the city's better for it. The thing about the social credit system is that there isn't one single system. Not yet. Different places have different rules. So what do you do if you have bad social credit? Well, for one, you talk about it on Weibo, which is like Twitter. There are forums for discredited people to vent and get advice. In Chongqing, we hooked up with Huang Huijun. He had a business until he was sued by a client, and Huang refused to pay 90 grand to settle it. So the court put him on a social credit blacklist, and things got way worse. He explains that being blacklisted means he can't buy airplane or train tickets. When he tries, a message pops up saying he's discredited. By the end of last year, blacklisted people were blocked from booking 23 million flights and 5 million high-speed train trips. And the list goes on. Being discredited makes it hard to get a job, a loan, a hotel room, or put kids in certain schools. Then there's the public shaming, photo galleries of blacklisted citizens. There's even an app that shows who around you is in debt. In China, being monitored is nothing new, but algorithmic surveillance makes it possible to collect data to build detailed profiles of people, especially the ones not loyal to the government. Of all the video surveillance cameras on the planet right now, nearly half of them are in China. People bothered by privacy concerns?
So we think a lot of camera keep the safety is really good things. A lot of people, we can accept it.
And cameras are getting smarter. So the information that comes up from my image identifies that I'm female, middle-aged, talks about whether I'm wearing glasses, the shape of my face. AI is taking them next level. They can do more than just see. They actually understand who they're seeing. So at what point can the technology know too much? Does it already?
Most time, people don't care about it. But if the technology learns too much, for example, cross the red line, it's not very good.
How far off are we from needing to draw those red lines?
It's very hard to say. I think maybe decades, I mean 10 years or 20 years, 15 years, maybe.
That's not very long.
Yeah.
It's coming.
It's coming.
And where does it all go? Hao-yu isn't so bothered. Her Sesame score is high. Life is good and she's used to living most of it online. Soon, her education and medical records and any run-ins with the law will factor into her social credit score. And wherever she goes, someone will follow and ask, who can you trust?
As I mentioned earlier, the Amazon One device, they want to be able to track and control our spending.
Well, there's been a steep decline in Australians using ATMs. In just 2 years, the total number of withdrawals has halved from around 50 million to 25 million in May.
We're also taking out far less cash, a $4 million per month drop since 2018. But while using plastic might seem quicker and easier for purchasers, buyer beware, it does come with added costs. For more, we're joined by Graham Cook from finder.com.au. Graham, good morning to you. What's driving this trend, and do you think we'll soon see the complete end of ATMs?
Well, I think it's now going to come sooner than later, with stores more inclined to refuse to accept cash at all, and people very reluctant to take out cash. We've seen, as he pointed out there, a collapse in the use of ATMs in Australia. Now, it took 10 years for the first 25 million users per month reduction in ATM use in Australia from 2008 to 2018. We've seen that same number just in the last 2 years. So it's definitely accelerating. Previously at Finder indicated that we expect ATMs to disappear in about 30 years. Now we're refining that, and I think it's probably going to be closer to 10 to 15 years before ATMs disappear completely.
Yes, gosh, we've really seen that coronavirus has accelerated the use of plastic, haven't we? So what is the most preferred way of paying in Australia right now?
Oh, so by far it's debit cards. EFTPOS cards and debit cards are the way to pay in stores and attract the lowest fees. Credit cards can be, subject to slightly higher fees, but that is the most popular way to pay in Australia right now, and it's probably going to dominate the way to pay in the future. I mean, I'm just thinking of my activity in stores locally. The only places now that don't take card anymore are maybe the dry cleaner and the bakery, but everywhere else pretty much will accept the debit card. Even little street stalls and coffee stalls will now all accept debit card.
Here's a picture I took myself the other week. As I'm seeing these signs going up more and more, they're creating a false change shortage to move us quickly to a cashless system for easier tracking. So what happens when your social score says you didn't show up for church on Sunday and they decide to cut access to all your money? Now, Australia still practices freedom of religion, but what would happen if they didn't? Well, we don't have to wonder. We can look at China for that.
July 22, 2020. A loud knock on the door at the home of a woman in China's Xiamen City. She tells the police outside they cannot enter her home without a permit. Moments later, they destroy the lock and enter anyway, breaking up what the government says is an illegal meeting. 4 days later, Sunday, July 26th, government workers removed the cross from the roof of Small River Christian Church in Xinfeng County, Jiangxi Province. These are just two recent examples, both incidents occurring just days ago in the Chinese Communist Party's crackdown on Christians and their churches. China Aid President Bob Fu says this wave of persecution actually began in 2015. But now the Chinese Communist Party has a new excuse for targeting Christians.
Now, under this pretext of COVID-19 coronavirus, the Chinese Communist Party has intensified its persecution by banning all the church activities, even those services or worship or prayer meetings in believers' own homes with their own family members.
The government is also using this as an excuse to arrest Christians who call for online prayer meetings. CBN has reported on the removal of crosses from church buildings, and this month it picked up steam. In addition to the Small River Church cross removal, on July 7th, more than 100 Public Security Bureau police and others were sent to oversee the demolition of crosses at Aodi Christian Church and Yangchang Christian Church in China's Zhejiang province. Security guards reportedly beat Christians who tried to stop the cross removals. Church members saying those injured included a man in his 80s, violently pushed to the ground. And on July 5th, police interrupted services at Guilin in Guang Church, arresting church elders. Hours later, church members sang hymns outside the 7-star Public Security Bureau station as they awaited the release of their leaders. Fu says it's all a part of a new campaign of sinicization, which means Christians are only considered to be good citizens if they adhere to communist ideology.
And ironically, Xi Jinping's portrait was even put on the church pulpit along with Chairman Mao. And the first line item of worship, by the government-sanctioned church before COVID-19 was to sing the Communist Party's national anthem.
And examples go beyond churches. In Fuzhou City, a Catholic family was forced out of their government-subsidized housing after they refused to remove religious icons from their home. And China's Religious Affairs Bureau has banned religious funeral ceremonies and preaching in funeral places. Meanwhile, Christians aren't the only ones suffering. Ethnic Uyghurs from East Turkestan, a region the communist government calls Xinjiang province, are under attack.
China is home to one of the worst human rights crises of our time. It is truly the stain of the century.
The U.S. Council on International Religious Freedom goes further, calling it genocide. For years, the Chinese government has forced Uyghur women to undergo abortions. Now, a new development. The president of East Turkestan's government in exile told me on the Global Lane that China is also conducting forced sterilization.
Hundreds of thousands of Uyghur and other Turkic women have been forcibly sterilized by the Chinese government. China has a long-standing policy of forcibly aborting Uyghur and other Turkic babies. In fact, according to the Chinese government, between 1979 and 2009, they prevented 3.7 million illegal births in East Turkestan.
Also, Hudayar and the U.S. Defense Department say as many as 3 million Uyghurs are being forcibly detained in re-education and forced labor camps.
Beijing described Xinjiang's internment camps as vocational training camps. New reports of forced abortions and sterilizations add to a body of evidence that contradicts that.
The U.S. State Department is alerting corporate CEOs and others about China's use of Uyghur slave labor, so they won't become involved. The East Turkestan government in exile is taking its case to the International Criminal Court. But whether it is the persecution of Uyghurs or Christians, China's communist government is likely to ignore international outrage, describing it as foreign interference in Chinese internal affairs. Gary Lane, CBN News.
On this episode of China Uncensored, what? Is this the Roman Empire or something? Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Karl Marx, the creator of communism, said religion is the opiate of the masses. And so the Chinese Communist Party set out to prove how much more rational and broad-minded they were than people who partook in silly superstition, by going Hulk smash on it. Especially during China's Cultural Revolution, a systematic campaign in the 60s and 70s where they wiped out religion and traditional culture. They destroyed China's priceless cultural and spiritual heritage and even tortured Buddhist monks. Yeah, that'll teach people something. Probably that when the Chinese Constitution guarantees freedom of religion, it's guaranteed in the same way as freedom of the press.
This is not illegal what we're doing. This is our own David McKenzie and his team, roughed up by police in Beijing.
But
there has been an awakening.
That's right, religion in China is on the rise. Not for Communist Party members, obviously, they're required to be atheist. But Christianity in particular has seen a massive resurgence. There are estimates that at this very moment, there could be 100 million Christians in China. That's more than there are Communist Party members. When was the last time I heard about a 100 million strong spiritual movement in China? Oh right, Falun Gong. So you can guess how this is going for Christians. Actually, you don't have to guess. There's been a 150% rise in the Chinese government's persecution of Christians in just 1 year, according to last year's annual report by China Aid. It's particularly bad in Zhejiang province, sometimes called the Chinese Jerusalem because of how many Christians live there. Pastors have been arrested and congregations have been assaulted for defending their churches from being demolished. Over 1,000 crosses have been torn down there since 2014. Though to be fair, the party did give them the option of destroying their own crosses first. The persecution is most severe, unsurprisingly, for house churches. Those are illegal, unregistered churches, because if you want to have a church, it's supposed to be registered with the government, so the atheist Communist Party can appoint the priests and pastors. That could be why a developer in Henan province, who was hired by authorities to demolish one of these unregistered house churches, felt he might have been authorized to bury 2 people alive who tried to stop it. The house church leader Li Jiangong and his wife Ding Cui-mei stepped in front of bulldozers to stop the demolition. According to China Aid, one of the crew said, "Bury them alive for me. I will be responsible for their lives." So the bulldozer knocked them in and buried them. Li was able to dig himself out, but Ding didn't survive. There's video of this, but it's pretty disturbing. You can watch it here if you want to feel terrible and angry. But look, if you think authorities would tolerate this kind of outrageous behavior, you'd be wrong. Authorities have already stepped in to pressure Li to not give details to the media. Because come on, there's no need to make people feel bad about the Communist Party as a whole. Really, this is only the problem of one single developer. What's that, Shelley? It's happened before. Wow, I would have thought killing people with bulldozers would have been a one-off thing. But more importantly, the Communist Party doesn't want the media to know how widespread and common their persecution of Christians has become. Anyway, 2 perpetrators from the demolition crew that killed Ding Cui-mei last week are already being criminally detained. So come on, Justice has been done, right? Time to move on. Surely, that'll be the last time Christians are persecuted in China. Oh. So what do you think? What will the future hold for Christians in China? Leave your comments below, and if you like China Uncensored, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.
Very soon, the Pope is going to condemn the persecution of Christians in China and get the world to come together to the point China will have to get on board, and it will make the Pope look like the great savior of Christianity, and the whole world will wonder after the beast. We can already see the forming of concentration camps around us for when the Pope decides to persecute Sabbath keepers.
One of the things in terms of hospital capacity that's going to be really important is a really good learning from China that we got from the World Health Organization team that went there, is if we have communities where we have enough capacity where we can put people who are positive with COVID-19 and have them be exclusively reserved for individuals who are positive for COVID-19. This reduces our need to try to protect patients from other patients because they're all positive already. We need to protect our healthcare workers and our service workers in those facilities. This gives us reduced burden on personal protective equipment, but it also can give us greater capacity as we put field medical shelters up, as we consolidate into single facilities, as we don't need individual rooms, negative airflow, isolation, etc. A vastly more efficient utilization of our healthcare system. This is all part of the planning work that we've done and are promulgating throughout our healthcare system. So that's our strategy. We're going to keep building that capacity, though. Very good.
Monday night, Walmart stores across the country suddenly closed, supposedly a result of plumbing problems, they said. Tonight, Hillsborough County Commissioner, who worked with Walmart for years, says he has plenty of questions. ABC Action News investigator Adam Walser joins us live with what he's learned. Adam?
Well, Brendan, in Midland, Texas, which until Monday was home to one of the top 10 busiest Walmart stores in the country, the city building official told me his plumbing inspector was sent away when he offered to help secure permits. While the company claimed to have plumbing problems, a longtime employee of a tax service located in that store said she never saw a plumber or an out-of-order restroom in 3 years. Now, this was the scene at the Brandon Walmart Monday night during a 5-hour store closing sale. That store pays more than $243,000 a year in Hillsborough County ad valorem taxes and collects many times that amount in sales tax revenues. The store appeared to have been fully stocked with perishables when the sudden closure was announced. Fresh-cut flowers were on hand at the Tulsa store. The I-team has learned that no plumbing permits have been pulled in any of those cities. Permits in Midland, Texas showed that 70 plumbing fixtures were just replaced in an 8-week period 3 years ago. That store never closed during the renovation. Hillsborough County Commissioner Victor Chris says Walmart officials didn't even mention plumbing issues when they reached out to him to inform him that 400 people would lose their jobs.
It's really too early to tell whether or not there were mistakes made or there's issues to be held accountable for. But we're going to watch, we're going to look, we're going to listen, and we're going to make the appropriate steps if we see anything that is wrong.
Every official I spoke to said this week's action was extremely unusual for Walmart, which always notifies officials ahead of renovation plans and normally seeks permits weeks in advance. I'm my team investigator Adam Walser taking action for you.
Not to be too conspiratorial, but there is definitely something going on here. I want to wake everyone up to the fact that in the very, very near future, with a snap of a finger, Sabbath keepers will quickly be hoarded off somewhere in the night, never to be heard from again. In fact, our own people will turn on us and be our own worst enemies. And he could even do it under the guise of, oh, they tested positive for an illness, so we had to put them in quarantine. And as we've seen with all the false COVID death reports, like the guy who got hit by a truck while riding his motorcycle and they listed his death as COVID, you could just never come back. And they could give a death certificate to your friends or family and say, oh, the illness got him. We're already on a slippery slope. I mean, who would have thought they could make us all wear masks all the time and not leave our house? Well, this world is degraded to such a sick stage that we're on the brink of America calling for a moral rebirth, just like the Arizona senator we heard last week. And the degradation of our society has reached dizzying lows of debauchery and degradation. Promotion of overweight transgenders is beautiful, which mars the true beauty of the image of God we were made in. Obesity alone creates health problems, which do not enable us to better bring glory to God. And of all the gender issues, they only bring attention to self. Not only is it being promoted to teens, now we have little transgender kids being promoted as a normal thing to be celebrated. For instance, here is Desmond is Amazing with famous drag queen RuPaul.
I wish you could see this gorgeous little queen right here with the pink on. Can you come up here? Come up here. Come over here. You look gorgeous. Help.
One time, Desmond is Amazing performed a tease dance at a gay strip club while men threw money at him. One interesting point of the article is that a lot of the gay men left because even they thought it was morally reprehensible. How bad does something have to be to make the sexually immoral walk out because their standards aren't that low? None of this can lead anywhere good, as we see in this headline. Something bad only leads to something worse. Gender confusion, homosexuality, and drug use all masquerading around and being promoted as just a fun time, and you can be whatever you want to be. You know, the whole follow your heart, which we discussed is a bunch of false teaching because the Bible says that the heart is deceitful above all things. So a bunch of progressive, common good parents thought it would be a great idea also to have transgenders, and this one, specifically dressed as the demon Baphomet, read to children for a public library story hour about just being themselves. Fortunately, there are still sensible people out there, and some of them showed up in clown suits with protest signs that said, "Drag Queen Story Hour, adult entertainment for kids. Welcome to Clown World. Honk honk." Here we have a kid's book about Santa's husband. As the gentleman said earlier, this is being indoctrinated in our children from birth, and it doesn't get better for adults either. This new Netflix series terribly sexualizes 10-year-old girls as they dance and twerk like their adult stripper counterparts. Of course, when Christians speak out against it, they are called angry and told they shouldn't watch it. Who needs to see a nuanced examination of 10-year-olds other than Hollywood pedophiles and pedophiles in general? Here's an article about a show called Preacher. It says, "Preacher is disgusting, blasphemous, outrageous TV, and all the better for it. A sex scene with Jesus has caused predictable outrage, and now Hitler and the Pope are a part of its mission to be offensive to all. But in fact, the Supernatural series is as morally responsible as it is hilariously reprehensible." How can you call any of that morally responsible? And here you're also saying that it's caused predictable outrage. Like, oh, these Christians just getting upset over this or that, and then once all the Christians are on board with Sunday, it'll just come down to us. Like, oh, those Sabbath keepers just causing all that angry trouble. But this is entertainment? It's just disgusting. And apologies if you're watching with your phone and feel like doing this with your fingers, because it's also despicable. And the government, and now even the churches, are going along with it. You can see here a mother is marrying her daughter. The government now allows just about any kind of marriage. Here's a queer satanic sheriff that was elected, believe it or not. And here California Governor Gavin Newsom on Friday signed a law that would give judges a say on whether to list someone as a sex offender for doing naughty things with a minor. The bill would expand the discretion currently granted judges in statutory unrequested love-making cases, and was promoted as bringing fairness under the law to LG blah blah whatever defendants. Now, of course, BLM is all about sexual perversions, and now the SDA Church is going right along with all of it. But we know from the Bible and the spirit of prophecy that the world will come to a point where once some calamities start happening, people will say we need to turn back to God. And it's already happening and has been happening. Sunday laws, known as blue laws, in America have been experimented with, off and on since the beginning of our country. Here's a blue law map pick. Here you can see a map of the counties with blue laws. Some range from only affecting liquor sales all the way to car sales and businesses not being able to operate. So now let's see what's been happening in the rest of the world in the very, very few last years. March 28th, 2018, the Catholic Church welcomes law that begins with ban on 2 Sundays a month, extending to all in 2020. March 2nd, 2017 in Belgium, shop opening hours close Sundays during specified hours unless an alternative closing day is chosen. Furniture and gardening closed 40 Sundays per year. March 2nd, 2017, Austria, shop opening hours, Sundays and public holidays closed on Sundays. March 2nd, 2017, Greece, shops opening hours closed, no exceptions. Iceland, shops on Sundays, generally closed. Shops must close by December 24th, 4 p.m. and may not open until 6 a.m. December 25th. November 5th, 2017 in Germany, 30 ways to avoid boredom on a Sunday in Germany. Germany's strict opening hours mean it can be difficult to think of stimulating activities to do on a Sunday. Only allows 8 Sundays open per year. See, and there's the point where they can say, well, why don't you just go to church? There's nothing else to do. March 13th, 2018 in Poland, stores remain shuttered all over Poland as the country's new Sunday shopping ban went into effect March 1st, 2018. The new law will be introduced in stages, but in 2020 they will be shut every Sunday except Easter and Christmas. Sunday shopping began only when democracy and capitalism returned to Poland. May 21st, 2018, East New Britain eyeing holiday and Sunday law. Work is in progress to draft a policy, at least on Sundays, all shops should be closed. September 6, 2018, Hungary. In 2015, Hungary's Christian Democratic People's Party enforced a Sunday shopping ban. Hungary's Independent Union of Retail's employees urged the government to consider reinforcing a shopping ban on Sundays, too. September 9, 2018, Italy. New Italian government plans to curb Sunday shopping. Shopping on the weekends is about to stop. The new Italian government will introduce a ban on Sunday shopping. The Italian government believes the shopping is destroying family traditions and creating distance between family members. September 11th, 2019, Zurich, Switzerland. I think it is great to have less shopping on Sundays. It is nice to have one day a week which is calmer and on which shopping is not a priority. The lack of commerce gave people the opportunity to do other things, and that this tradition also respects the time, family time, and leisure time. And then it'll turn into time for the Lord. On the incorrect day. March 2nd, 2019, Spain. Shopping acceptable, 16 Sundays per year. Some regions only a total of 10 open Sundays. January 2nd, 2019, Poland. Proposed by Trade Union Solidarity, Poland shops are open only on last Sunday of each month in 2019. Trade on Sundays was previously only allowed on the first and last Sundays of the month. This has been further reduced to one, the last Sunday of the month as of 2019. As of January 1, 2020, there will be a blanket ban. Those who violate the restrictions will face fines of between $25 and $2,500 American, while repeat offenders will be facing prison sentences. President of Poland said, "I'm confident that with this law, we will return to normalcy." Notice that word. And get used to the fact that, as in other EU countries, in Germany and Austria, shops are closed. Notice all the whole, just get used to it, just slowly works its way in. You know, first you have 2 Sundays, now you only have 1 Sunday, now you have no Sundays. And it's just to normalize everything. September 4th, 2018, Bulgaria. A Sunday trading ban, which went into effect on March 1st, 2018, aims to gradually impose restrictions. In the third year, 2020, the law will allow for Sunday shopping only 7 times per year. An entity violating the new restrictions risks being fined up to $26,000 American dollars, while repeat offenders may face fines of up to $264,000 American dollars, or even a sentence and community service or deduction of 25% of their monthly income. Some see it as an opportunity. By opening later to 11 p.m. during the week, a greater number of customers can now be seen on Friday and Saturday shopping. March 2nd, 2017, France. There is a principle of Sunday rest for employees. Mayor's Sunday. Shops can be opened on Sunday by mayor's decision with a limit of 12 Sundays per year. by the decree to enforce the institution of the papacy, the violation of the law of God, the United States will disconnect herself fully from righteousness and make provision for papal falsehoods and delusions. Then the marvelous working of Satan and the end is near. From Ellen White's Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5. Here we can see the starting of Sunday law, even affecting the Israelites keeping their Jewish Sabbath, who many will be tricked by the Pope into giving up their traditional Sabbath for the Sunday of the common good and the environment. And where you can't get businesses to close, they start even smaller, like in some countries, even starting in South America, where they are banning the travel of private automobiles on Sundays. Unless, of course, they're a green, eco-friendly electric car. Because, hey, it's all about the environment, right? Wink. I'm nowhere near the education level or speaking talent of many great teachers, but I hope my words and thoughts laid out like this call all of you in your hearts to wake up. Realize that the guy standing on the corner we've all grown numb to, with the sign that says Jesus is coming soon, he isn't crazy, he's right. Although he is a bit crazy in the view of the world, as we mentioned, standing up for Jesus goes against every grain in society, and most especially against the common good. One day, if we stand up for him, we will be called crazy too. But take heart. Acts 5:41 says, "Then they left the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer dishonor for the name of Jesus." Romans 5:3 says, "Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing the suffering produces endurance." 2 Corinthians 12:10-11, "For the sake of Christ, then I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong, being strengthened with all power, according to his glorious might, for all endurance and patience with joy." Speaking of great teachers, I'll let Doug Bachelor sum this all up. I pray you all had a wonderful and restful Sabbath. May God bless us as we go into the week, and may we share the light of truth with all those around us.
Hi friends, Pastor Doug Bachelor here. I'd like to give you just a little bit of a prophecy news update. It is looking more and more like the Pope plans to introduce Sunday laws cloaked as an environmental emergency. And we've seen this. It first came out with his encyclical that he wrote in 2015 called Laudato Si, where it was talking about the necessity to rescue the environment. And in that, he makes several references to the Sabbath. Matter of fact, I'll quote from that right now. And the encyclical is like 40,000 words, and it's itemized in paragraphs. Paragraph 71, "The biblical tradition clearly shows that this renewal entails recovering and respecting the rhythms inscribed in nature and by the hand of the Creator. We see this, for example, in the law of the Sabbath on the seventh day. God rested from all his work. He commanded Israel to set aside the seventh day as a day of rest, a Sabbath. Similarly, every 7 years there was a sabbatical year that was set aside for Israel." Then you go to paragraph 237. "On Sunday, our participation in the Eucharist has a special importance. Sunday, like the Jewish Sabbath, is meant to be a day," he said the Jewish Sabbath, it was a law. "Sunday, like the Jewish Sabbath, is meant to be a day which heals our relationships with God, with ourselves, with others," and note this, "with the world." So he's saying it's Sunday that will heal our relationships with the world. It's the environment. "Sunday is the day of the resurrection, the first day of the new creation, whose first fruits are the Lord's risen humanity, the pledge of the final transfiguration of all created reality. It also proclaims man's eternal rest in God. The law," there's that word again. In fact, the word law appears about 20 times in this section of the letter. "It proclaims man's eternal rest in God. The law of weekly rest forbade work on the seventh day." And of course, they say, well, Sunday is every seventh day. "Even now we are journeying towards the Sabbath of eternity, the New Jerusalem, towards our common home in heaven. Jesus said, I make all things new." And that's paragraph 243 in his encyclical Laudato Si. And you go to paragraph 211. "Yet this education," now the reason I mention that is because the Pope, he said back, about a year ago, that he was calling the world leaders to the Vatican for a special compact on education of the world. And that was postponed and rescheduled for October. I think it's the 11th through the 17th because of the pandemic. But as far as I know, that is still on. And whether they do some of it by Zoom conferencing or people are going to come in person still remains to be seen. But he's calling together the leaders of the world. Now, just this week, today is the 3rd of September. On September 1st, Vatican, New York Times, Associated Press, here's the headlines in the religious section. The Pope is using the pandemic to give the environment vital rest. And of course, rest is the hallmark of this whole Sabbath issue. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown the earth that it can recover if we allow it to rest. And we must spur the people to adopt simpler lifestyles to help the planet groaning under the constant demand for economic growth, Pope Francis said Tuesday. In his latest urgent appeal to help a fragile environment, Francis also renewed his call for the cancellation of debts of the most vulnerable countries. That's how you get the poor of the world, which is most of the world, on your side. Say, I'm telling the rich to cancel all your debts. Such action would be just, he said, since the rich countries have exploited poorer nations, their natural resources. In some ways, the current pandemic has led us to rediscover simpler and sustainable lifestyles, Francis said in a written message. Already we can see how the earth can recover if we allow it to rest. Now, you may have heard my post that I did, I guess a couple of months ago, on a growing chorus of voices that are calling for Sunday laws. Leading periodicals and speakers around the world are saying something we're learning from the pandemic is it may be a good idea for us to once again institute a mandated weekly rest. They say if we don't make a law out of it, companies wanting to exploit, the economy will go 7 days a week. We've got to make a law that everyone needs to rest, and the day they're going to pick is Sunday. And this has been in the Pope's thinking for some time. People, and he goes on and says, the whole creation is groaning under the weight of what's happening. Citing the medical, social, and economic crisis triggered by the pandemic, Francis said it was time for restorative justice. Drawing attention to the earth's fragility is a hallmark of Francis's papacy. He poignantly stressed people's pressing responsibilities to heal and care for the environment in a 2015 encyclical. And, the Pope is saying when we look at what's going on in the world now, the air has become cleaner during the pandemic, which is true. The water's cleaner. There's less traveling in the water. The animals have returned in many places from where they had previously disappeared. Some of the rush of traffic has made it more acceptable to birds and animals. The pandemic has brought us to a crossroads, he says. This is urgent. And I just think he's paving the way for something that may be introduced in his talk in March. And so he draws attention again to his environmental encyclical he wrote in 2015. This is in the New York Times article. The pontiff issued his appeal. This appeal was made on Tuesday to mark the World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation, an annual occasion that was established for Christians, he's saying all Christians everywhere, in the wake of the encyclical Laudato Si', his declaration, we must save the environment. So, I think this is very interesting. And then, of course, the Pope now has this global pact on education. And it's not limited to educational and academic institutions, but rather in the belief that commitment to education must be shared by all. It involves representatives of religions, international bodies, and the various humanitarian institutions of the academic, economic, political, and cultural world. Everybody who is anybody is being invited to this summit to engage in how to re-educate the world to save the environment. And I'm almost certain, based on what he said so far, he's going to be in favor of a Sunday law, among other things, to say we've just got to do something. We've got to take some concrete steps, let the planet rest. The pandemic has taught us every seventh day. And, this is something, it's not going to come under a guise of religion. It doesn't matter if you're a Buddhist, a Hindu, if you're a Taoist or a Christian or a Muslim. Everyone lives on the planet. He's going to say we all must get behind these Sunday laws to rest the environment. In fact, even as recently as today, the Pope issued another statement referring to his encyclical, and he said the Catholic Church is fully committed to protect our common home. This is a drum that he continues to beat, and he says, in order for us to have a new planet and to save the environment, we must have new humans. That's a rough paraphrase of what the Pope said today. So this is near and dear to his heart, and he is consistently pushing that we must save the environment, and I expect that a Sunday law is going to be part of that. So friends, brace for impact, stay tuned, it's coming. Just stay close to Jesus and keep studying his word. Oh, by the way, before you sign off, Amazing Facts is having a special prophecy seminar. We're going to talk about this and much more, and it's coming October 23 through November 14. It's called Revelation Now, and what a great time to sign up for a Revelation program. Anybody in the world, if you have the internet, if you watch 3ABN, Amazing Facts TV, YouTube, we're going to be doing the Revelation Now.
All right, surprise bonus. I ran across this article and I had to share it, as we've spoken of in an earlier video about the state of the dead and the dead being used by the devil, or at least demons that are pretending to be lost loved ones, coming to tell us that, oh, Sunday's the true Sabbath and things like that, and the reason why we shouldn't be tricked by spiritualism. I just found this article really interesting, and I'm just gonna finish off with this little video clip of being spoken to from beyond the grave, which we can see this all starting. So I hope we all keep watch. Thanks so much for staying around to the end. Much love to you all.
It's very hard for me to look at this. So please, please listen to what our son has to say.
Yo, it's me. It's Guac. I've been gone for 2 years and nothing's changed, bro. People are still getting killed by guns. What is that? Everyone knows it, but they don't do anything. I'm tired of waiting for someone to fix it. The election in November is the first one I could have voted in, but I'll never get to choose the kind of world I wanted to live in. So you've got to replace my vote. Go to unfinishedvotes.com, register, then go vote. Vote for politicians who care more about people's lives than the gun lobby's money. Vote for people not getting shot, bro. I mean, vote for me, because I can't. We've got to keep on fighting, and we got to end this.